That's right, we're talking about Ting Lu today, the moose with a bowl on its head that's got VGC players, both at the highest level to the casual battlers, all rethinking how they have to battle in this new age of the format. Where before teams were focused on being more offensive and dealing with as much damage as possible to quickly wipe out major threats, now teams have to consider more slower play styles, and especially the terror that is causing higher tier players the occasional nightmare, the infamous one-hit KO move, Fissure.
Is there more to us than the words we say, the games we play? Can we know that we're not dreaming?
Let me start by saying, first, I am not a pro VGC player. I'm not a pro VGC battler. At best, I am moderately skilled. And unlike the highest tier players, I'm running very niche Pokemon like Bombardier and Zoroark. So my input might not be the strongest. But as far as Ting Lu is concerned, I have run both Fissure and non-Fissure Ting Lu in competitive, so I know how viable and unreliable the move is. I also recently did a poll on my channel, and while my reach is small, 68% of the people who responded to it actually liked the idea of this Pokemon being able to go for this one-hit KO move, compared to only 32% of people disliking how it can, break through the toughest walls with a roll of the dice. Now, if you've listened to players like Wolf Glick and their take on Fissure Ting Lu,
for me personally, I don't like it. I don't respect it. So if you're thinking about playing Ting Lu with Fissure,
you know he has no like or any respect for anyone using Fissure Ting Lu. And while he does make good points, he also explains that Fissure as a concept isn't doing anything wrong with what it's trying to do. It's a move that guarantees if it connects, will defeat any Pokemon, provided they aren't sturdy, using a focus sash while at full HP, flying, or have the levitate ability. It's a 30% accuracy move that defeats the target if it connects. And in a game where, after missing so many crucial 95% accuracy night dazes while using Zoroark, getting frustrated when my Tinkaton misses a 90% accuracy play rough on a vital target, and of course, the frequent Will-O-Wisp misses on high target physical attackers like Annihilate, Dragonite, Chien-Pao, and many others, and more recently, missing 90% accuracy Rock Slide moves on both targets. Missing Fissure, a move with a 30% accuracy, is something I'm not going to lose any sleep or going to stress myself over. One thing about this meta, it is quickly evolving into a two-team build format. Either your team is super offensive with very few bulky Pokemon, or your team is heavily bulk built and is designed to chip and stall your opponent over time. Thanks to the inclusion of the 4 Legends of Ruin, teams can destroy their opponents in one hit or outlast them and let them kill themselves over the long term. Pokemon are built with more bulk in mind to protect them from being KO'd in one shot unless focused down, or to be as highly offensive as possible to deal that one-punch knockout. But what is it about Ting Lu that makes Fissure such a popular move for it? Well, Wolf Glick explained it better, but long story short, Ting Lu hits very hard as a physical attacker. If it gets burned and intimidated multiple times, all of that damage, however, just evaporates. If it gets intimidated and burned, let alone burned, what is Ting Lu supposed to do with so low of an attack stat under those conditions? Like all physical attackers that get hit with those conditions, it's basically slapping the opponent with a rubber chicken at that point. To put it into perspective, a burned and intimidated Ting Lu does only over half damage to Fluttermane, one of the most physically frail Pokemon in the meta. And if the Fluttermane is anything but Terra Fairy, or, I don't know why, but Terra Rock, it isn't even flinching at the sight of that heavy slam. And what about a Pokemon that isn't physically frail? Say, for example, another Ting Lu that isn't burned or intimidated. Well, under those conditions, Fissure or the move Ruination are its only real responses to hopefully quickly deal with such a terrifying threat. But where Ruination won't kill, Fissure will. As unreliable as Fissure is, clicking Fissure and hoping it lands can be its only way to deal with threats, as, yes, Ruination will deal 50% of the target's total health regardless of burn or intimidate, but Fissure you can always rely on, other than being so unreliable, is that if it lands, the Pokemon it hits isn't going to be seeing another turn. Another case for why Fissure Ting Lu is popular is if you remember at the start of Series A, when the entire field was all Dondozo and Tatsugiri. Yes, we're going back to the Dondozo Tatsugiri everywhere days, and everyone was either using the dynamic duo or building teams designed to fight against it. With how hard the Dondozo was to take out in a Dondozo mirror matchup, there was only one way to beat it, and that was the move Fissure. People were running Fissure Dondozo specifically to counter other Dondozos, and then those people were playing Terra Flying Dondozo to counter said Fissure Dondozos, while also running Fissure, and then those people were running Terra Flying Dondozo to counter said Flying Fissure Dondozos. The point was, Leftovers Dondozo was just so bulky and hard to KO that unless you had a way to reliably deal with it, in a mirror matchup, you basically had to rely on a single 30% shot to take it out in any timely manner, while using up as few resources as possible against it. And this was before Ting Lu. Yes, that phase was short-lived, but Fissure Ting Lu is already being phased out, and Dondozo dominated the meta without dominating the championships long before Ting Lu was allowed into the competitive scene. If you're staring down something you can't break through with your Pokemon, you're up against the wall and have no way to reduce their strength. That one-hit KO move is probably your last option to get you back into the game. Another point about Ting Lu is that it is the only Pokemon, besides Dondozo with Tatsugiri, who can reliably go for Fissure. No other Pokemon has that option. One-hit KO moves are unreliable given their nature, and most of them are given to fragile Pokemon with either low defenses or HP that honestly would prefer to be using other moves to begin with. For example, are you ever going to click Sheer Cold on Chien Pao? No. Why waste a turn hoping to one-shot him on when you could go for an Icicle Crash and almost be guaranteed an almost one-hit KO thanks to its high attack and devastatingly powerful ability? The odds of it surviving a turn after using and failing to use Sheer Cold are very unlikely. The only other Pokemon to my memory that could even remotely reliably potentially use a one-hit KO move in any sense was Articuno when it had access to the move Mind Reader, which always ensured that the next move Articuno used would connect with the target, meaning Mind Reader Sheer Cold would always work with an Articuno, unless the opponent protected. But after Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, Articuno cannot use Mind Reader anymore, so no longer does it have access to that niche plan. In order for one-hit KO moves to work, the Pokemon has to be able to constantly use it over multiple turns in a battle. In VGC, most battles on average last 7 to 9 turns unless they're very slow. The odds of a Pokemon lasting on the field that long are almost impossible to figure out, due to how much damage gets flown around, and especially how much damage gets blocked, and how many times a Pokemon may be swapped out. In order to stay on the field consistently for even half of that turn count, it needs to be bulky by default, be trained with bulk in mind, and be able to absorb absurd amounts of damage, and more often have a way to restore its health in some way. Ting Lu is the only Pokemon so far that I can think of that has access to all of these factors. It is bulky, most people train it for high HP and special defense, equip it with an Assault Vest to withstand special attacks, and finally partner it up with a Pollen Puff user like Amoonguss or even Wo Chien. At the same time, Ting Lu reduces special attacks, and if it's with Wo Chien, the two basically can never die if set up properly between Leech Seeds, Leftovers, and Pollen Puffs. Can you think of a Pokemon that is willing to give up multiple turns of going for reliable attacks for the trade-off of getting a one-hit KO move off? while also getting hit from multiple sides and still able to stay on the field consistently. No, there aren't that many Pokemon capable of doing that. Ting Lu is the only one. Now, before I conclude this video, I want to ask this about Fissure. Is it any more or less effective as a move that knocks out an opponent in one shot than, say, using a super effective move with a choice band or specs that also does the same thing, but obviously without the risk of missing? What about moves that knock out in one shot because of a crit that you weren't accounting for? Obviously, one is luck focused and the other relies on a Pokemon's typing, but it's still a similar idea. Both defeat the opponent in one shot if you don't block or dodge them. Is Fissure Ting Lu reliable? No. Of the Ting Lu teams that were in the Masters division of EUIC this April, only 2 made it to the finals, and neither of these vessel holders were seen in the matches. Fissure is unreliable, but it does serve a purpose. It is there to help break nigh unbreakable walls of HP and defenses. Ting Lu, however, doesn't rely on Fissure to make plays. It can be trained in different ways. In my comments, people who were fans of rolling the dice understand that it is what it is, and they like how it combos with Stomping Tantrum, and even once said that stall takes skill in this meta. But they also understand how unreliable it is, and that is why even though I ran Fissure Ting Lu, I swapped off to build another Ting Lu that better suits how my Wo-Chien and Ting Lu like to work together. But if there comes a time or a point where Fissure becomes necessary to be run again, I know I can rely on Ting Lu to at least use Fissure more than once in a battle. But what about you? What are your thoughts regarding Ting Lu and Fissure? Write down in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe if you are so inclined. I'll see you all next time. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Bye-bye!
When you've reached the point where you can't go on, just come to me, you'll be safe from harm. If you trust in me, then I'll trust in you. There's nothing more that I need to do. If you put your hands in front of mine, we'll be shining through one at a time. Just understand